Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Jeff Rock, and welcome to another D. Hilton Associates webinar. Today, we're going to be in part 2 of our 2-part series talking about board practices. We do have a lot of great information to cover, but we're going to be shooting for about 45 minutes on this one, so we'll have plenty of time for questions afterwards. So we'll dig into it, but let me take care of a couple of administrative items on the front end of things. This webinar will be recorded, so you will have an opportunity to go to our website at dhilton.com. Go ahead and view this webinar on your as you can. There's also all of our other webinars there. There's a lot of great content, so feel free to go through that as well. You'll receive this slide deck on an update email that's following after this webinar, so no worries there. You'll get the information that we're going to go through here. Also, you receive a survey. If you take a couple moments, please go through that survey. Give us some insights on how you thought the webinar went, or even some topics you'd like to hear in the future. Last but not least, if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A section. The Q&A will come right to us. You can use the chat section as well. If you select all participants, then all the participants in the webinar will also be able to see your question and or comment. So without further ado, I want to introduce our team today. Joining me today is John Andrews. How are you, John?
Good afternoon, Jeff. Doing good.
Thank you for joining. And we also have Hillary Miley. Hello, Hillary. How are you?
Hi, Jeff. How's it going?
All right, guys. So we'll go ahead and take it away. This is part 2. We appreciate your insight. Take it away.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, so this is the second part of our board survey. We conducted this survey last year, and we sent the survey out to the CEOs and board chairpersons of almost 1,800 credit unions, so all credit unions with assets over 100 million. And we gave participants the option to respond via the paper survey or to complete an online survey. So we got a response of 685 credit unions, which is an overall response rate of that group of 38%. And 67% of those were from CEOs and 33% were from chairpersons. All right. So obviously, the most important thing to make note of when we start talking about board compensation is that federal credit unions are not allowed to compensate their board members. So we're just focusing on credit unions that are state chartered and allow compensation. So we asked credit unions, of those state chartered credit unions that participate in the survey, approximately 50% say that their regulator does allow some form of board compensation. Obviously, regulations vary pretty widely among states that do allow it, and we're seeing those regulations change pretty frequently over each year. So you definitely do have to keep kind of up to date on what your state is offering. So 22% of state chartered credit unions that participated report they compensate their board members. You can see that number has increased slightly each year that we have conducted the survey. We started doing 14. And in 2014, just under 12% of credit unions that are allowed to compensate say that they compensate their board members. And right now we're all the way up to 22%. And this does vary quite a bit over different asset groups. So larger credit unions that are over 1 billion in assets are more likely to compensate their board members compared to those that are under 1 billion. So among those 1 billion plus credit unions, 34% say they compensate compared to 15% essentially or less for those smaller credit unions.
And I just like to add is if you're a board that's considering this proposition of some type of reward or recognition for directors, even though the chart will show you the correlation, the bigger the credit union, the more you're getting paid. The chairman's job is still the chairman's job. It's still the set of same responsibilities. Still need the same types of committees and same type of input from your volunteers. So don't let that discount that if that's something you're thinking, well, that's only for the bigger credit unions. There's cases to be made at each level. And I would kind of throw out there that sometimes the smaller credit unions actually need more volunteer expertise to kind of supplement what we can do for staff. Whereas if you're this $1 billion credit union, maybe you could go get the technical expertise in some of these areas, where at a smaller credit union, we're all in this together.
Compensation structure varies as well. The most popular form is a meeting fee, which is utilized by 37% of credit unions. About a quarter pay a monthly stipend, And then yearly and quarterly stipends are used by 13% and 11% of credit unions respectively, and then only 7% say they use an hourly rate.
And this is an issue that's coming up. The optics of how we put these plans together. Meeting fees been the most traditional way. Fortune 500 has done it. All the way down to how we're doing it in our industry. The concept though is you want to really have really good guidelines there if you pick that, because you don't want the appearance of let's meet to get a paycheck. And we're not for profit to start with, and we want the optics to look like we're doing that. So I do see more stipend questions putting an annual or a quarterly type of program in place as opposed to the per meeting. And we'll continue to do the survey to see if that plays out, but that's what I'm kind of seeing from clients right now.
And this is governed by a lot of regulations. Not all states say exactly how you have to structure it, but some states do stipulate how they have to put the program in place.
And I've worked with more clients where, that's the first question on the table is how often and when and how. So this is why the survey helps.
So we ask credit unions to share the compensation for each individual position on the board. And you can see that the median annual compensation for most positions is between $12,000 and $17,000, while the median annual compensation for the chair position is higher at $24,000.
Let me stipulate right here on this, because I get this question a lot too, is there's two concepts here, right? There's one is we all get paid the same, or we pay our officers a different amount or a different tier than we do for our regular directors. So let's go back to the slide just to put it back on the screen real quick. So when you see, well, how does a treasurer make less than a board member? It's simply because think of those two types of design options. One is officers at one level and then volunteers or directors at another level, or we're all paid the same. So in that scenario where a chair gets paid the most, the table officers get paid the second. Usually that board member is going to make, in this scheme, might make $7,500 or $10,000 or $12,000. So that's why if you're scratching your head on why that would be higher, that's usually the result.
And also, I'm going to talk about median compensation throughout. And the reason we do that instead of mean compensation is because there is a big range of what that compensation looks like. And, if you have a very small value or a very large value on either end, it can change that number. So median is a little more representative of kind of what that range looks like across all credit unions. So if we look at compensation by position across each asset group, credit unions with assets of $100 million to $249 million report median compensation of $2,400 annual for officer positions, while the median compensation for a standard board member is $1,763. And one thing to note as we go through each of these asset groups is that not every credit union is going to compensate differently for every position. The most common thing we see, like John was talking about, is the chair, some of the other officer positions, and then a board member. Not all of them stipulate between, say, the secretary and the vice chair. So for credit unions with assets of $250 million to $499 million, median compensation for the chair position is $4,500, while median compensation for the other officer positions are a little bit lower, around $1,600. And then we see median compensation for board members is $10,000.
This is an ugly chart.
Yeah.
But it goes back to my earlier point, is like in this asset band that we're looking at, there's a lot more credit unions that are using a standard fee across the board as opposed to a differentiation between officers. So if you fall in this category and it's not lining up with your current practice or your intended practice, take a step back, maybe use the overall data, not just this data cut.
Mm-hmm. So as we get over $500 million in assets, you see median compensation increase for some of those officer positions. A median annual comp for the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary for this asset group is $7,200 per year, while standard board member compensation is $5,500, and then treasurer is $6,600.
Prettier chart.
Yep. Pretty substantial step up.
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So when you get to credit unions that are 1 billion plus, compensation sees a notable increase. Median share compensation is 25,000 annually, while other officer positions varies between 18,000 and 21,000. For board members, median annual comp is 18,000 as well. And then you can also see within this asset group, 1 billion plus, that these credit unions also do indicate different compensation for committee members. So median compensation for committee members in this asset group is 14,500. Just over 20% of credit unions report that they offer compensation for their supervisory committee members. 7% compensate for associate advisory members, and then only 1% compensate their emeritus members.
So that's a question, when we look at designing principles and who's in and who's out. The holy grail in a credit union is to have a pipeline of potential volunteers on the bench. And a lot of places, the supervisory committee or an audit committee have been the traditional pipeline. And as more credit unions look at associate and advisory types of concepts, that will continue to rise. And I haven't seen a lot of movement on the emeritus piece, that you've done your commitment. We want you to do a successful transition to the person as you stay on the board in that capacity, that we don't see that as a trend of seeing that number go up. That'll probably stay really, really low, but you'll probably see the associate and the advisory move up in the next few years as based on the credit unions that we're working on and designing these plans for.
So for those credit unions that do compensate, 52% put the program in place more than 5 years ago, while 19% implemented it in the last 3 to 5 years. About a quarter put it in place in the last 1 to 2 years, and then 5% implemented their program in the last 12 months. And 18% of these credit unions also reported that they used a third party to develop their compensation program. And, as we see state regulations continue to change, obviously, I think we will see an increase in those recent program implementations. For example, Louisiana, Illinois, and Virginia all updated their regulations just in the last 1 to 2 years.
How do you know that?
Because
is that how you spend your spare time?
Yes, it is.
That's impressive.
The data, that's for sure. She knows where things are going.
But that's also one of the reasons that this type of survey is conducted every other year, because regulatory changes take time. And, if we're going to really be reporting trends, it makes the most sense to do this on a biennial basis so that we can account for those trends and we're not surveying when something is about to happen. We're allowing those changes to happen in between surveys.
And there's a lot of state legislatures that work in 2-year cycles.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And, it's great that it gets adopted, but the next question, well, how? And they go, well, we still got to write the how. And then so we have a lot of clients that just take the leap of paper. It says on paper we can do it, so now how do we do it?
We'll know what's in it when we actually go through it.
Or when somebody says no, which is too late. So, the idea of our commitment is in every 2 year, you've got this nice baseline set. We're looking for changes. If you just gotta know, you can go to 990s, but that's 2 years old. So we think we're kind of being the best we can be to notice changes and not be, redundant and no new news. So that's kind of the thought process, But love to hear from you guys. If you think that's something we should do more frequently, we'll entertain it. But that's kind of what we've done since 2014. We had a question earlier about do we do any more slices of data after like maybe 5 billion or 10 billion, and right now. There's a little over 400 credit unions over $1 billion space. 50 to 60% of those skew between 1 and 2 billion. When we get out, to 5 and 10 billion, it's an outlier in terms of having peer comparisons. Mm-hmm. So, if you're that size looking to do this, you're going to be perhaps looked at in your state a little differently. Hopefully, you have a good relationship. But we're going to show you a little later. Here's a good practice to go against. Having this type of data helps you. And remember, these are percentiles, guys. So If you do something higher than the numbers you've seen today or want to do something higher than that, doesn't mean that you're an outlier. It just means we're trying to give you the central tendency right now.
Mm-hmm. So we asked credit unions, do you feel that your current program is competitive? And John will talk about this a little bit more in a minute, but I think in general, what we see on this slide is that there are a lot of credit unions that really don't know if their program is competitive. And that's part of the reason that we even do this survey is there's not a lot of data out there because this is a fairly new concept for credit unions is, how do you make sure that your program is reasonable, which is in a lot of the regulations how it's described. It has to be a reasonable program. So
and lawyers and regulators can debate the heck out of reasonable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, having some type of context for your decision is important. I want, my personal goal is to see this number go up. I want people having peace of mind that they've deliberated the issue, put a program in place, and are confident that you're doing the best return for the members by doing this. The genesis for a lot of this work was, we're doing a lot more regulation. We've got a lot more responsibility as a volunteer than we used to have, trying to recruit people. I used to joke, says, hey, you want to come be on this board? We'll pay you in Subway sandwiches. And if you don't do it right, there's huge criminal and civil penalties. So, come on board. And so as we look at this next generation of volunteer leaders, the idea of the time that they're going to have to spend, just think of the mandates over the years about more required continuing education. We need to make a value proposition that makes sense for their return, in return for this action. So, that's how I see it, and I would love to see more people confident in their programs. The fact that 1 out of 3 credit unions wasn't sure that it was good or bad says, we need to get you off the fence. We need to say, hey, it's a good plan. We've done the research. We're confident that we're getting the best. We're attracting the best to be on the board. And then for the no's, this needs to be, in exec comp, we look at comp philosophy every year. The optics of saying we reaffirm what we want to do. I would suggest that would be the same thing if you are compensating your volunteers today. Every year reaffirm the process. Well, we did that 5 years ago. Do we have to do that? No, you don't have to, but I think, best practice would say it's really strong to do that. So we can explore the no's. On the chart we just saw, if what is it? How many? It's
22%.
Call it 1 out of 5, right? 1 out of 5 are saying, I don't know if it's competitive. Well, if you have every year, you're going to reaffirm that. It's not to make it more. It's the process of saying it validates the assumptions that went into it. Your business changed.
Yeah.
You do a merger.
Talk about the why.
It's the why. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. You double in size because of merger. You have different volunteers. Re-examine it. It's worth the time.
And also, if we are seeing regulations change, even just within each state, that's something that credit unions, when they're evaluating their program, they have to keep on top of. And, as they're updating it, other credit unions are adding programs, so you're getting more data points. So, continuing to evaluate it and collect those data points is really important.
Yeah, if you were a no in 2017, meaning because of the state had different regs, they moved the regs and you haven't visited again, that could be one of the issues. So,
Yep.
Data's the king. Makes you feel good. Give you peace of mind on that.
So, do you have a plan to implement a compensation plan for board members? So, about 70% said they don't have a plan to put a program in place, and that went down by about 10% compared to when we did the survey in 2018. And then 4% say they plan to put a program in place within the next 2 years. And one thing that I did note is we don't see a lot of difference for this question across different asset groups. Obviously, we see that compensation programs are a little bit more prevalent with larger credit unions, but the intention to put plans in place does not really change much depending on how large a credit union is currently.
Okay.
So there's different insurance policies offered to board members. Obviously, EEO and director's insurance are the most common, while 20% say they don't offer any insurance to board members. And something to keep in mind is this is self-reported. And then 9% offer life insurance to their board members, 7% say they offer disability, and then 4% offer health insurance.
What I found interesting in this one is I don't know if everybody knows what they have.
Yeah,
Meaning,
for sure.
If you were a volunteer in another group, the first question I would ask is, am I liable or am I on the hook for anything if it goes wrong? And in credit unions, we have arrows and admissions, and we have different type of coverages. So technically, I thought that would have come back with a higher number, but it also goes to awareness of what you have or not have. So, not harping on that, other than if I'm recruiting for board members, I want to make sure I know what we do have in place. And the insurances are a key thing, or I wouldn't green light, going into an organization where I'd be putting that at risk. Okay. So kind of our next part of the program, we wanted to talk about, if you're thinking about doing this or reaffirming what you did, here's some things, kind of a good methodology to practice. You can do this yourself. Obviously, we do this work, but it's just been kind of our practice over the years to put this in place. So think of it as 1, 2, 3. First thing is, a lot of states don't have a set application, a set guideline. You need to go through your reg and see what the best thing to offer when it comes to making your application approved. And you've told me, Hillary, there's some states that you just do it and then they find out later, right?
Yeah, things are a little gray, I would say.
Are you a lawyer?
Fluid.
That's a lawyer answer right there. A little gray.
Situation is fluid. That's what.
Yeah. So step one is, in some cases, you're not going to have to go to. So, networking and see what other folks have done, working, D. Hilton clients obviously get that information. So the next thing is, and Hillary started the presentation day with what reasonable means. So as much data as you can gather, it's going to give you more peace of mind. Every year that goes by, we're committed to getting more data out there. I'm sure there's other sources that you can get stuff as well from. So the idea is we got to make sure that it's reasonable for your size organization and scope of responsibility. And the final thing is you got to pay for it. So to be able to prove that this is a good investment, a good return, and look, at best practices, whether it comes exec comp or volunteer comp, it's, you get what you pay for. And if you have a high performer, potential leader in the community, you want them on your board, we need to recognize that their time is valuable, and we need to recognize that they're making a commitment, and we need to make sure that we've got the best for our members.
It's not really how much you're paying, it's what you're paying for. I think that's always a big, important differentiator when you're talking, especially with executive compensation. Same thing with volunteer compensation.
Oh, yeah. So we had a question, obviously a lot of our discussion today is about state charter, but when it comes to insurance programs, there are things that federally chartered credit unions can do that's not cash, and there is ways to look at that. So I don't want to get anybody's hope up.
No, the insurance question is all credit unions, not just state chartered.
Hillary made this sign like I'm playing baseball. I'm on third. Am I supposed to steal home, or am I supposed to touch? What am I supposed to do?
His mic.
They're going to get a triple play on us, Hillary, if I can't remember what the hand signals
Shut
are.
it down.
Yeah, so the question, I'm sorry, I cut you off, but say it again.
The question regarding insurance policies, that's all credit unions that participate in our survey, not just those that are state chartered.
Yeah, and that just reinforces my comment that says I think people need to know what they have before we get started, or one of our preliminary discussions is let's make sure everybody understands, because again, I want to go sell this hard in the community if I want to go after somebody, so I got to make sure I have those questions answered. All right, so I'm going to go back to the slides here. So we talked about 1, 2, 3, and now put it in kind of a process diagram, so go clockwise. So the first thing you've got to come up with are, how is your program going to be structured and what you're going to do with certain instances. So a question that came up, do you do fees for committees in addition to board meetings? And that'll be up to you. But yeah, we see a lot of people say, look, if you're on a standing committee, there should be a per fee for that work as well as your attendance at a board meeting. Some people say, well, let's just do an annual or quarterly stipend, say whether we meet 3 times or 5 times. I don't want the appearance of, we're meeting just to get a plan. So first one is you got to do your housekeeping internally to say, what do you want to do? The second step is, how are we going to define good standing? Are we at a position on our balance sheet to be able to absorb this and to make sure that we're successful and it's not impacting, a camel rating or our optics among our members? And members come first. So if this impacts ROA to a degree that it's hurting our product offerings, our delivery channel offerings, then that's probably a no-go. But most credit unions, based on that definition or the bar of criteria, would be able to move forward. We use 5 years. You pick your number. Then the third component is we got to do that reasonableness test. So we got to prove that we're within that. So, we had a comment. Well, can you put data, 2 standard deviations above the mean to kind of say below and above to have a range? Absolutely, we have that data. The problem is, or the challenge I should say is, depending on how you define your peer group, it might be a very, very, very small group. So at this point in our research, we feel more comfortable giving you that overall number by peer group band, as opposed to saying, well, what does California do in the $1 billion space? Because it might not be a strong enough comparison that I'd feel good about, which means you're going to have a wider variance, which may help you, but it's also harder to come back to, is it reasonable? And then obviously document the heck out of this, and reaffirm annually on what you're doing. And not so much for regulators. I think it just helps you with legacy, as the people that put the plan in place, and then we have new directors, which happens, that they understand the intent, why, and we can keep the consistency going. And then finally, you're going to have to do some housekeeping. You're going to have to notify members or notify regulators of what we're doing and have to disclose that. But if you do it in this sequence, I think you'll be able to walk the walk or back up the rationale why you're doing that. So as I circle back, one thing, I've got a few more slides to talk about the requirements to receive pay, and I think that's where we want to go now. We had a good question come up. Is it all or nothing? Can board members decline to be paid? And that's actually come up a couple times this year with some of my clients. There are situations where certain jobs are not allowed to take take compensation from outside entities because the way their job requirement is, they have to be independent and not biased towards what's going on at work. We've made provisions in those cases where if you don't want it, Jeff, can we give it to our internal foundation in your name? So you can obviously say no, but I'd also say if you've done the work, can we do something for charity or a third party to recognize that? So, that's a good discussion to have, but we want unity. I don't want somebody saying no because I don't believe in board compensation. I think that's just a mirror of a bigger problem that we weren't in agreement going into this. So that's something to check about. So you can be real creative on that. Remember, there's not a lot of rules, so we have to just prove reasonableness. So one of the key things that we think high performers do is they evaluate themselves every year to demonstrate their effectiveness as a board collectively, individually as a volunteer, and then also self-evaluation. So there's really 3 strategies. So the things that we like, here's the things that we want to look at on an annual basis in an annual evaluation. So when the biggest thing when I do board governance work, clients are saying, well, what's the best way to evaluate ourselves? The high performers, everybody evaluates everybody. It's more time consuming, but John, you evaluate Jeff evaluates John evaluates Hillary evaluates John and Jeff. So if you have a 9-person board, you're doing 8 appraisals as a volunteer. But it doesn't work if the environment's not right. Human nature says we have people that are conflict avoiders, right? I don't want to talk about your bad stuff. I just want to talk about your good stuff. And let the chairman deal with that. So I think what happens is if we're going to be accountable to each other, and this is whether you're compensated or not, if you're going to be a contributing member to this team that's running this organization, you should be accountable and welcome that accountability. So a way to ease into that, sometimes we'll evaluate ourselves as a whole, the board does this, ... and then maybe the second year, then we go and we look at the individual person. So Well, can it be anonymous? Do I have to tell people what I said? Yeah, you can make it anonymous and you can have an overall number. But what we don't want is, if you've made the commitment, we want to make sure that, you're reading the board packet. And in the old days, you could actually catch people because you'd be opening up your board envelope at the table. You could hear the Velcro popping or whatever. And now with board portals and things, we know that you're getting the information and people are looking at that ahead of time and all those types of things. So think of it as you do self-appraisals. Jeff, do you think you're doing a good job? Or then, Jeff, are we doing a good job as a board? And then third is Hillary and John are going to give feedback to Jeff on how his contribution is. So those are kind of the three things that look good. And we try to preach that are really good high performers are doing right now. And if you were to do a self-evaluation, these are some of the questions. So if you want samples of this, when we do send you the deck or send you the email with the deck, these are things we'd love to see out in the field. So please use those. Okay. So I just wanted to make this connection is, if you get compensated, there should be accountability. So accountability says if you're supposed to do continuing ed, we're committed to doing our continuing ed. If we're committed to doing attendance, which is like, hey, showing up is kind of a big deal. You're showing up, whether that's Zoom or, Teams or in person, that you're doing that. Are you replacing yourself? Are you making sure that we have a good pipeline? All those things work in either of these scenarios. But the argument has classically been is the regulators have asked more of us, and we need to recruit more people that have these specific expertise, and let's look at compensation. So, we do just as many projects at D. Hilton where we go through that kind of that 4-step process and say we don't want to do it right now. That's A-okay with us. If it's not right, it's not right. If you think it's something to attract more people, let's look at it. So that's the quick overview on what we're seeing as best practices. So is that the last slide? Yes.
Look at that. Is that record time?
It was a NASCAR pit stop in my world. That's a lot. That's a lot of stuff. But I hope, again, we'll be available if there's any specific questions, because we'll look online here, but after the fact. I can't stress enough is the way we put these webinars together is you have access to the recording and the deck. And so if you've been the representative for the board, make sure that this gets in a board package, that you share that with your colleagues, because the more we get this out in the field, it's just going to make our industry stronger. And that's our commitment of doing this type of kind of original research. You got some dates to tell people about?
I do. Okay. So like I mentioned in part 1, the board survey report will be going out now that we've done both of these webinars. So we'll be sending out an email, and if you've signed up for these webinars and have, consented to receive those communications, then you'll get a email letting you know it is available on our website. And then also, the next item I wanted to discuss is our Total Reward Symposium is taking place November 10th and 11th. That's a Thursday and a Friday. And registration is now open on our website. If you visit dhilton.com/symposium or go to dhilton.com, there's a link on the homepage banner to our registration page. There's also information about where it's taking place, dates, general event things. Obviously, we don't have a finalized agenda yet.
Why not?
But I haven't gotten to that.
Get on it, John.
Yes. Hillary and I will be right on that, boss.
But yeah, you can go ahead and sign up. And once you're signed up, you'll be getting regular communications as information gets updated and as we do that agenda. So we'd love to see everyone in November here in the Woodlands, Texas. So we hope that you will register.
All right. Well, we got a couple of questions going in while the team is going through those questions. Just to wrap this up real quick, this webinar obviously has been recorded, so going as well to find the registration information, you can go to dhilton.com and actually watch a recording of this webinar, as well as all the previous webinars. You will receive the slide deck in a follow-up email as well, so you'll receive a link to be able to download that, as well as that survey that we talked about earlier. John, we have a couple other questions you want to go through?
We had a question on what are reasonable stipends for directors when the state won't allow compensation, and I think that's where you skewed more towards the insurance products. I have clients that are able to do stuff for retiree health care. There's people that can do, those types of insurance, which might be desirable from a volunteer's point of view. And the other one is continuing education. I mean, when we look at what we're required to do to making sure everybody understands they would have a travel budget to do that if it's in person, and to make their skills stronger, which could help them at work or other volunteer opportunities. So sometimes that's a good exchange as well. Are board expectations responsibility any different between those that are compensated and those that are not compensated? The answer is absolutely not. The idea is that take this off the table. If you're going to represent your membership with true heart and true passion and true expertise, you want to be better and you want to keep up, and you would make that accountability a part of your collective expectation. The compensation piece comes in and says there's a tipping point where you go, wow, they're asking a lot of me to do this, and I want to recognize and reward those volunteers that are helping us.
Is there any negatives, the clear negatives of paying a board?
The optics are, it's an oxymoron, right? A paid volunteer. You start there, and whoever coins that word,
it's like the guilty bystander. Wait, what?
But that we can't let semantics get in the way of the true intent. We'll come up with that word. I like to use reward and recognition in staff comp, right, Jeff?
Absolutely.
It's not about the paycheck. It's about the whole experience of working for the organization. When we do exec comp, we talk about reward and recognition. So it's not hitting a goal and paying for that goal. It's the idea that we wanted to do something, we accomplished it, and we want to recognize that. So why wouldn't we carry that concept to the volunteer level and say, we're asking a lot of you, and look, how we keep score, it's, you're going to have strong financials, and ebbs and flows of the market. We still do pretty well as an industry. But our job is, we call it's the wonderful life metric. How many kids did you put in college last year? How many first-time home owners were able to get a house because of your programs? How many single moms got reliable transportation because you put they didn't have to go to a used car gravel lot to get something that if they miss a payment, it's getting repoed. Mm-hmm. So I want the best people in our communities running credit unions in the volunteer fashion to support those initiatives. Not to be bigger, just so I can say I'm this size one day, because that's what's going to help this community. And we have an obligation to our full membership to create that environment.
It goes back to David Hilton's famous line, and that one is it's best for the members if ... And if attracting and retaining those board individuals that bring that specialty, it takes a small bit of compensation to do so. It's best for the members if.
Yeah. We talk about diversity. We talk about age demographics, gender demographics representing the membership, and we look at a lot of boards today, and we're not there yet. We have things we can work on to make it more diverse. And if compensation is a tool to get some of those, different organizations represented in our community, it's worth a shot.
And I do like your idea of if a director or something along our board member says, look, I don't want that compensation, having a fund set up that goes into to be able to provide that back to the community, or just, whatever that case may be, a donation. I think that's a great idea.
You earned it.
Yeah. How do you want to distribute that? Flow right through.
Yeah. We say the same thing with CEOs. Oh, I'm paid fine, but we need you paid at the right spot so we don't have compression for the VPs and on down the road. Mm-hmm. So give it to a mission, give it to charity, start your own thing, but don't refuse it just to say you don't want it. Use it for the good of the community.
All right. Any other questions come in? I think we are good. I think we've got them all. Anything, John?
Yeah, there's a few questions that are state specific that, call us after the fact and we can see if we can do some research, but I just don't feel comfortable off the top of my head saying yes or no. Hillary might be, but she's a brainiac, not me.
Hillary knows everything. 1-800-CALL Hillary. That's what we do.
And she's giving me that look like, next question?
That's right.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and put Hillary's email address up there and phone number. No, I was kidding.
No, I'll take care of it. I won't do that to her. But anyway, but I think that's our questions. We really appreciate the opportunity to visit with you again. Our next our next webinar is going to be about inflation and staff pay. What are programs people are putting in place to recognize that we're creating a tough environment right now with the economy? We can all agree that inflation is moved beyond transitory and it hitting pocketbooks. So we're making sure that we're looking at those information. And I will have dates and emails, so we'd love to have you participate in that in a couple weeks. Okay, Jeff, we good or?
I think that's about it, but
Yeah, I think we can cut it off.
we're good with that.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for taking the time. We do sincerely appreciate you joining us. Again, you'll have an opportunity to watch this again on our website. You'll receive an email with a slide deck, so everything there. John, Hillary, thank you so much for joining us. We always do sincerely appreciate your insight. Really do appreciate it. Always bring great data and great knowledge, and we can't wait for the next one.
Oh, I have one question.
Oh.
Let's do a poll. Should Jeff wear a tie next time?
Oh, gosh. Why do you throw me under this bus?
I just like to see you in a tie. You never wear a tie.
The inside thing is I absolutely loathe ties. I went with a jacket. I think it's... All right, guys.
Okay.
Thank
Good
you
night.
so much. It's been great talking with you, and we look forward to the next one. Bye-bye.
Okay, all the best.
The tie. Jerk.
I didn't ask about Olaplex thing. You're lucky.
Nobody on this call would know what that meant.
I'm going. Do you realize that me and Hillary use the same shampoo?
How do you get your... Well, that's...
We do.